Okay, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me now. I'm Leonard Ryman. I'm the host for tonight, and I'd like to welcome you to the first official Framework Education podcast. And we're talking about systemic change and the vision of the Latvian education system. We have a little presentation for you, and we have an expert on board here, Daiga Brakmane. She's working with the organization who is responsible for this change of the education system in Latvia. I'm sorry for that. And let me just introduce to you the Latvian education system. So the education system is undergoing a 5 years reform, and 2 years have already been done and 3 years they have to go. And they have a vision of the future pupil they want to achieve. The goal is to test and implement a new preschool and general education curriculum. That means that the time they are impacting the children is from 1.5 years to actually 18 years, so a very long period of time. They're trying to have a positive impact on the kids, and as I said, it's the preschool and the general education. What Daiga did is she had an interview with Zane Oliņa. She's the head of implementation, so she's the head of the whole reform plan. The reform plan itself is called School 2030, and this interview we will play right now if this is technically possible. Let me check it out.
Dear Zane, could you...
And this is already the interview, so we have the interview. While we have the interview running and you hear it, you can already post questions inside the chat function. So just write in the chat any questions you have regarding the education system, and afterwards Daiga will be happy to present answers to these questions. And now lean back and enjoy the interview Daiga did with Zane Oliņa. Have fun.
Tell me please briefly how and why did the implementation of the current competency-based curriculum project in Latvia start?
School 2030 or School 2030 is government policy initiative. It's an answer to the need to teach our youth elementary skills, and that was set in policy documents already in 2014 and after that. So it is now as a formal project, a 5-year project, which is implemented by the National Center for Education as a concerted national effort to review curriculum and teaching and learning approach in schools and preschools.
One part of the project is a vision of the future pupil. Why was this developed, and what does the project education and society get from this vision of a student?
Whenever a country faces an effort to revise curriculum, we all know that it's a start for lots of turf wars in terms of what should we put in it. So it was very important to get a shared understanding of what we're after as a goal. It's very important for us to have this shared vision because it really guides identification of then what are the absolutely important skills and understandings and values that kids should learn. So it's a uniting framework, otherwise we'll probably never finish discussions around what should be taught in schools. It's a very important starting point for any conversations with stakeholders, because we all have probably different views of how this can be implemented. And so through these discussions, keeping this vision in mind as a starting point, so if we can agree on the vision, then probably there's something we have in common so that we can actually agree on how to achieve it. So it's a very important kind of brokerage tool for any conversations and reaching agreements on loads of contradictory issues. It's been also very important guiding principle for us to then very carefully consider how shall we make this happen. because you can write visions on paper, but if your process contradicts the values you have in your vision, then you can actually spoil it, or it will never happen. So it has reminded us that we have to very carefully think about, okay, so what are the actions we need to take for teachers to understand this, for pupils to understand it, for parents to take it as their own. So it has been an important piece in that route. But then I think it's also been very, very important to envision kind of the future. Because when you develop curriculum, what happens is you have teachers who practice in schools currently. So when you hear a teacher who teaches Latvian, for example, they think that other subject teachers are not sufficiently emphasizing language skills. So what they do is they do more of it in their own lessons because they don't trust that other teachers will be doing it. Then you have science teachers who say, well, primary school teachers are not teaching enough science to kids, so therefore we have to start over. So you can't be building curriculum when you don't trust the other people. And it's very hard in these conversations to imagine what will it look like in the ideal world when this happens. And that's the only way how you can actually develop a coherent curriculum which doesn't overlap, or where teachers aren't in their silos, each kind of fighting out their turf. This is my skill, this is not yours. And so having a vision and deriving then your skill sets, your value sets, your learning areas from the vision actually helps keeping these things in perspective and trying to really imagine what it will look like when everybody is doing their job, as opposed to building it on the way how it currently happens in schools. So I'd say those kind of three main things where that has been very helpful.
Are there any good examples on how teachers start to work together or trust more each other?
We're currently really only in the pilot stage in the schools. I think the first tier of changes we're seeing is also among our own curriculum developers or authors. Because what's happening now is we are starting to identify who will start teaching which skill. For example, argumentation in the curriculum. It is an area where there's very close relationship between social studies and language teaching. So it's very important that they now discuss, okay, who will be teaching which component of argumentation in their lessons, and how do we build this in the programs? So I think that's what's happening currently, and a very similar process we are trying to teach our pilot schools. So all our professional development is around building school culture where teachers actually meet regularly and plan what they'll be teaching to kids the following month. So we are starting to see that teachers of related subjects do this more often, and that's a very important ingredient for realizing any vision. And so we have really decided for our pilot schools that for a whole year they should focus on one transversal skill specifically, so that they would learn this process of what you can gain when all adults in the school, in a kind of concerted effort, try to teach kids a skill in a systematic manner, and when each contributes with their subjects to this teaching, you can gain so much more in that way. And so having that vision as a starting point from which then these conversations derive has been a very important component.
One thing is to have a vision written on the paper and imagining how things should be in the end, but how is it actually working? How is it put into the materials made by the project, and how can we be sure that pupils are actually reached and getting to the becoming like we imagine in the vision?
Well, that's a $1 million question. I think there are several things we're trying to do. obviously we're not there yet, and it's a never-ending process. I think that's why we use it's a vision. So it's always a bit further up than what we think we can actually achieve. I think one thing is we are trying to identify and develop practical tools that curriculum authors can use to really see how each of the things we've stated in the vision can be developed across the curriculum. And therefore, from the very start in the project, we had what we call transversal skill champions, who each was responsible for a set of transversal skills, such as critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration, citizenship, etc. So you have an owner of a concept, which is very important, and which is a very cross-curricular idea. So you'd have someone who was looking with a certain set of goggles on the curriculum and working with each learning area to see how this can be incorporated in that learning area, in the actual curriculum, but then also in instructional materials. So that's one specific mechanism. We are also developing, we're not there yet with kind of final set, but kind of practical checklists, tools, a way for each author to put on these goggles, and how can I look at what I've developed with a perspective of, okay, is there enough thinking in my piece? Is there enough collaboration in my piece? Is there enough value of entrepreneurship in my piece? So that's one part of it, obviously, is what we put in the paperwork. But the other big piece is how do we help schools think in this way on a daily basis? And so a very big part of our professional development program has been getting school leadership team to understand this, in how important it is to actually establish a tradition in the school of teachers collaborating around curriculum. And so our main professional development activity actually in the project is training of all school leadership teams. So for all schools in Latvia, they go through training. And so they are the key audience, because their main task is to really establish in the school this very practical framework for when teachers can meet around what issues, and that their conversations increasingly are around students and the curriculum, not just whatever it is on the agenda today, which sometimes doesn't have anything to do with kids and their learning. And then the third thing really will be this is through loads of communication activities, through good examples, is to drive home the idea that what you do every day in the classroom connects in some way to the vision. I think that's going to be the toughest, to help every teacher see that, and really help them answer the question, okay, how is this question I'm asking today, how is the task I'm doing today, helping kids become what we've written in the vision. And that is continuous professional development, communication, good practice examples, and it's especially challenging because we are a former Eastern European bloc country, and so there's a tradition of easily writing plans, generating slogans, so people don't believe in visions as a genre, and they don't see that there's actually practical implication to that for my daily life and work. They don't take it seriously because we've lived the life of slogans which didn't come out in real life, and so we have this double challenge of how do we actually help people see vision as a mindset, through which you actually lead your professional life. And so that's something we struggle with constantly. And professional development with teachers and school teams, there's a huge challenge to really help each school articulate a goal for a school for a year for their kids, something that everybody would understand, something that's concrete and specific enough so you can actually evaluate how you're doing and gather evidence around that, we get loads of big words and slogans because people don't believe that this has anything to do with sort of practical and daily life in the classroom. And so that's a major challenge. And so we can say that, well, implementation needs strategy for lunch, same thing as vision. So you can have nice visions, and many countries have those for their education systems. And we had one. I mean, the current curriculum in place was very well written. It was very progressive for its time. It was written in 1998, and it was adopted in law in 2006. To this day, the goals, I mean, I wouldn't change a word in that. And most of what's in the curriculum, we've never implemented that in real life. So you can put in paper nice visions, but you have to get people to really take them on board and own them. And therefore, I think when we work with schools, we're saying, well, this is the starting point. I mean, we've kind of written up the vision for how we see, like these are the guiding principles for curriculum development. You have to make this your own. And so you have to, in each school, actually write the vision for your child, which is your own vision in your own school. And that will differ to some extent. It might be more specific, richer, broader, whatever, but you have to actually understand what's in it and own it. Otherwise, it won't work.
And if there wasn't a country who would love to make their own vision, what would be the suggestions learned, like lessons learned from our process?
Well, I mean, we didn't have time to actually engage a whole host of stakeholders in developing the vision. And I mean, as I said people have to own it. So we didn't have the luxury of time to really go through a year-long process or whatever with different stakeholder groups to really discuss it and make it like a national process. So I think that would have been a wonderful thing today, but we had to move on, and then kids can't wait. They actually had to go to school today. So that would be a very important piece there. But also, I think it's very important to realize and to emphasize that it's always a process, that it's not about, okay, we wrote up this very nice vision and then the work is done. It's always about checking every day when we make our decisions, when we derive goals, when we develop curriculum, when we plan our lessons, is that we check back, is this aligned with what we said? And that we have regular conversations at all levels, from teacher to school to us as a national agency developing curriculum. Is what we're doing now aligned with the values embedded in the curriculum or not? So I think having those processes in place is a very crucial piece. Otherwise, the vision will never become alive. It will just be written on paper.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your experience. Good luck with implementation.
Thank you, dear listeners. You can actually be always informed with us. Just go into our newsletter, join on our website, www.frameworkeducation.eu. And if you want, you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for listening in, and maybe see you next month with our next topic when it's about growth mindset.